The whole law and the prophets depend and begin with those two commandments. What I would propose to you is that not only does the law, and when Jesus says that the law and the prophets, he's talking about what we would think of as the Old Testament. I would propose that we could take it even a step further, and Jesus wouldn't mind. The entirety of our faith begins and ends with these two commandments. But here's the problem. Do you know what the word love means? Somewhere I'm sure somehow I'm sure you could say yes, but I get frustrated so frequently because our world, the way that we talk about love, whether it's in music or movies or the way in which we just throw the word around, it tends to really lose its meaning. It loses its depth, its edge, its power. The word love is just not some warm, fuzzy feeling of positive affection. Do you understand what I'm saying? We misuse this word so frequently that when we hear Jesus using it, we forget what it means. So let me take a moment and remind you. Substitute the word love with the word priority. That which you prioritize the most in your life, the highest priority, the highest value, the thing that gets the most effort, the most passion, the most energy, the thing to which you pour your talents, your time, your emotions, your efforts, and your resources. That is what you love. And in Scripture, love and worship is the same thing. What you love is your God. What gets your priority, your highest priority, that is your God. So the commandment that Jesus offers to us today is simply this. If you need to forever substitute the word love with prioritize, go ahead and do that so you don't forget what is being said to us today. That which you love above all things, that which your entire life is consumed with the most, that is your God. And so we hear in the second reading, Jesus complimenting the people because St. Paul complimenting the people because he's saying, and I don't know if you heard this, he said, you have turned from your false idols towards faith in God. You have turned away from loving the wrong things, idols, false idols. If we love something other than God, if we prioritize something other than God, that is a false idol. And so Paul compliments the people saying, you have turned from your false idols and you have turned to faith in God. You have replaced the love of other things, the prioritizing of other things, and now you live differently because your priorities are different. The way in which you go about this life, the way in which you go about this world looks different, and people notice because your priorities are different. Because what you love has gone from something to God. It's really important for us to step back and have a moment of honesty about our culture, because our culture, and even very real parts of the world in which you live here on campus, insists that you prioritize something greater than God. Have you ever surfed Instagram and looked at all of the influencers on Instagram? Have you noticed how they prioritize the self? Luxury, beauty, wealth. These are false idols, which our culture insists We must prioritize value. These are the things that our culture tells us we must love above all things. Pleasure. I'm sure many of you have seen the lifestyle that some people think is expected, that you must go out and experience all of the urges and the inclinations that your heart has to offer. You have to fulfill all of them, otherwise there's something lacking in your experience of life. So we're told, go out. Hook up with whomever, experience whatever pleasures and enjoyments are available to us. That's the right thing to do at this moment. These are all false idols. Please don't misunderstand that I'm not trying to preach hellfire and brimstone or beat anybody up, because I know this struggle is difficult. Remember what God said in the first reading? I'm compassionate. I'm merciful. I understand the struggle. But let's not let the readings pass us by and not be challenged by what's being said to us today. We must be very vigilant when it comes to the question of loving God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. What's being said is prioritize God above all things. Period. Above money, above luxury, above status symbols, above the self, above pleasure. God changes the way that we live if we truly love him. And the second greatest commandment is very much like the first. Because when we love our neighbor as ourselves, the reason we love our neighbor is because our neighbor is created in God's image and likeness. To love God means we must love our neighbor because we see God in our neighbor. And time and again throughout the Gospels, Jesus reminds us who our neighbor is. Our enemies, those are our neighbors. The first reading made it very clear: the poor and the vulnerable, the widow, the orphan, the immigrant. Those are our neighbors. Again, the heart and soul of the first greatest commandment, love God, and the second greatest commandment, love your neighbor as yourself, is to reorient your priorities and to live differently because of it. That's what this means. If we Christians live in such a way that looks like everybody else, we have to ask ourselves a question: are we really loving God above all things? Are we really loving our neighbor as ourselves? Because if our life looks like the life of everyone else whose priorities are something other than God, I would propose to you, maybe we're not doing it the right way. So let me heighten the challenge for you this morning. I want to paraphrase something that Father Pedro Arrupe, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but there's this beautiful, beautiful quote that I'd like to paraphrase for you to complete my thoughts this morning. There is nothing more practical than finding God. God is love. And when we find God, it is nothing less than being totally, absolutely, and being completely transformed by love. What you love, what completely and totally captures your imagination, what radically changes your life, changes everything. What you love changes all aspects of how you live. What you love determines why you get out of bed in the morning. What you love determines why and how you wrestle with the struggles of your day. What you love determines how you spend your evenings. What you love affects what happens on your weekends. What you love changes the things that you read, the games that you play, the things you do to pass the time, the way that you grow. What you love changes who you know. What you love changes everything. There is nothing more important than totally, completely, and radically falling in love with God so that nothing else will ever be the same. This is the greatest commandment. This is the greatest joy you can ever know.